time to continue. Don't worry if you didn't have a chance to finish up this part. We will continue this later on, or we also have some time working on it when we take a lunch break later. But I would like to introduce you to Mr. Kent Agerlund, joining us all the way from hopefully a sunny Denmark, but Denmark nonetheless. Hey Kent, how are you?
Hey, I'm good, and I haven't seen the sun in 2 hours. It's 5 o'clock here.
Traditional Nordic gray weather.
Yeah, rain, but life is good.
Yeah, sounds good. But yeah, we have a good crowd here today, as you probably have noticed, and once again, it's the Academy's absolute privilege to have you back and talk about things that I know that you like to talk about. So without further ado, meet our keynote speaker, Mr. Kent.
Thanks, and once again, thanks for having me. It's an absolute pleasure here. Before we start, I just have one ask. Can I share my screen?
Yes, sir. You have been granted permission officially. I have witnesses.
So let me go ahead here and share the screen. You should be able to see the screen by now.
Yeah, looks like a 2-day screen.
Yep, perfect. So, as I said, first of all, I mean, it's really a pleasure being here. I've seen this class a couple of times before. I've never had the privilege of attending all 5 days, although I would really love to do that. So I know you're in for a treat. My session here is the planning for cloud native endpoint management. It's something that I do on a daily basis, and I will say that Johan and Andrew and I have been talking about this for years. That's often how it is, talking about new technologies, but now it has really catched up. Of all the projects that I'm doing right now, it has something to do about migrating away from Active Directory only on the devices, not on the users, over to Entra, and then as part of that, also into Intune, into Defender, and all of that good stuff. Microsoft will say it's easy. They always do that. Totally understand why they say it. They sell the license. I'm glad it's not easy because I'm a consultant. We and that's us consultants. We've made a lot of mistakes, and luckily we are going to share those mistakes with you so you don't make the same. That's really what this session here is all about. And as Jon said, I'm from Copenhagen in Denmark, born and raised here, hence the funny accent. And I've been around for a long time. So I really started up as a developer all the way back in 92, started in infrastructure back in 95, started working with SCCM and so on in 96, 97, been working with Intune actually since 2011. And I have a feeling that I was, one of the 20 people on the planet back then working with Intune because there were not that many. So that's really me. Today I work as a security principal, and I don't really know what that title means because everything is surrounded by security these days here. I have always traveled the world. I really enjoy doing that. COVID had me slow down for a little bit, but then good things like Zoom and Team happen. So now I still get to meet the world. It's just in my own office. Not quite the same, but still, it's okay. In front of me, I have a couple of monitors, and on one of them, I have the meeting chat. So if you have any questions, feel free either to just shout out, or if you prefer, then you can write the question in the chat there. So first of all, just a little perspective of evolution and kind of the pain that follows. I'm not going to talk about this for a long time, but I think it's kind of important to understand where we are coming from, and obviously you know that because I mean you are working with that, you've been doing that for years, I presume. But it's important to understand where you're coming from, because you won't be able to migrate everything over, in 8 hours. That means that you need to have a plan for, how are you going to support multiple environments. And I would say that's really the challenge. That is probably the biggest challenge in my opinion. So once upon a time, when I showed up in the office, it really looked like this. You probably can't see it, but we have some nice desktops right here on the table, and we were all of us was kind of working from the office, um, working on the file servers. So we had the C drive, the T drive, the G drive, and so on and so forth. Everything was perfect, right? And then once upon a time, if we had to work from home, then we could obviously do that with the likes of Citrix and so on and so forth. But this was a traditional workplace for many of us. For some, and I visit a lot of customers. For some, this is still what it looks like. Obviously, that pose a challenge. That pose a challenge, for security. Applications that you're using may not be updated by the vendor, and so on and so forth. So having all of these legacy systems, even though they have worked for years, quickly becomes a business critical thing. Now, that was also the time where the best you could do for security was literally to build and buy the latest and the greatest firewall. That still resonates with a lot of security experts, with a lot of CISOs. They still, believe that a hacker will, sit outside the firewall and try to breach the firewall, and that's really the only thing you have to worry about. But in reality, we all know that is not the case any longer. So today's reality, we all have a mix of devices. If I'm looking right in front of me here, I have a couple of laptops, I have a phone, and just behind me, I have a Mac device. And in common, for all of those devices is that I use the same identity. So different makes, different models, different operating systems, but the identity is the same. So it doesn't make any sense if I only try to protect the hardware devices instead of also protecting the identity. I think it's kind of fair to say that this obviously also poses a headache for many. It poses a headache because, as I said, we have different make and models in here. Back in the days, maybe you were fortunate enough to only have to worry about Windows devices. I can say that in my company, we are about 3,000. 45% of those devices are Mac OS devices. And if you've been managing Mac OS devices, in the last period of 3, 5, 10 years, you probably have not used Configuration Manager for that. You probably haven't used, Intune for that. You have been using a third-party tool for that, and that complicates everything, in my opinion. It's not uncommon that we have, one system for managing mobile devices, one system for managing Mac devices, another system for managing Windows devices, and maybe we are using WSUS group policies and what have you to manage our servers. That obviously makes it super complex. And very often it will be, it won't be the same person having the overview and being able to manage all of those devices. I don't see many organizations moving away from a mix of devices and only, hey, we're just going to use Windows devices. I see the opposite. And I also believe that the opposite is natural. I don't care what kind of device that you use, as long as it, it supports our security requirements, as long as it supports our system administration requirements. Okay, so for whatever reason you choose a Mac, that's perfectly okay, but it has to be, one of these 4 or 5 Mac devices here. And the same goes for mobile devices. Another reality is definitely also the mix of locations. So, maybe we're not working from the beach, but we're definitely not only working from the office. Back in the old days, when I was running a remote class like this, I would definitely have to be in the office. Now I'm sitting in my house, which is super convenient. But I've been working from pretty much every location on the planet. I even remember one time I was doing a session like this for Johan, and I was sitting in a phone booth in an airport in London. So as long as we have an internet connection, I have the same security, then I'm able to do my job somewhat. But this also poses a security risk that we probably didn't have to think about a couple of years ago, because we super easily get distracted, right? The sentence that I don't want to hear is, from a user is, I think I clicked the link, and you go like, oh, oops, that's going to, that means a lot of extra work for me. And it's super easy for a user to get distracted, especially when you're working from home. So when we're looking here at this picture down here, and we have this cute child, she's probably the cutest kid on the planet. But at one time, she's going to, talk to her dad or whoever it is there, and he may be clicking on something he shouldn't be clicking on, because, as Johan mentioned in the beginning, multitasking is probably not our strongest side. And the bad guys, they know that. So the more you may go like, so why are they sending out these fake emails that look so ridiculous? Well, they don't expect that those emails that they send out to 100,000 users, they will get 100,000 clicks. But they do know that they will get maybe 5 or 7 or 8% clicks, because you have 5 or 7 or 8% of the people that are just distracted. And that is definitely a reality that we need to think about, and you need to do that as well. Even though you may be saying, I'm not really in security, we're all in security. And when you're working with Intune, you're definitely working in security, if you ask me. So we also have a mix of spaces, which is also super interesting. So, now here we are in Zoom. I may be in Teams. I was in a Teams meeting earlier, and I'm sharing, all of my files everywhere. So some files go to OneDrive, other files, as Johan shared here in the meeting chat. We have documents everywhere. And that definitely poses a challenge, because as a user, do you expect that I know where I can save my documents? Because if you expect that I know that without any training, you're not doing your job right. So you need to realize that a mix of spaces is a challenge to the end user, and that is another one of the areas where I see we actually fail a lot. We don't take adoption seriously. When I talk to a customer, and they upgrade to the latest version of Microsoft 365 or whatever they do, they don't really supply any training. When they hire new people, very often a lot of those organizations, they don't really supply any training. They just take for granted that everybody knows, hey, how does PowerPoint work? And maybe PowerPoint is kind of easy to get started on, but all the rules that you have about, should I save my files in SharePoint, in Teams, in OneDrive for Business, and so on and so forth. People don't know that. So, and on top of that, as I said, the threat actors, they don't really rest. They're having their time of their life, and they're having their time of their life for various reasons that I just mentioned there. So that's kind of the intro, and there are a lot of good things here. One of the good things is Microsoft are collecting a bunch of signals. So when your device is connected to Intune, or if your device is in Defender, what have you, Microsoft are collecting a bunch of those signals, and on a daily basis, they're collecting like 100 trillion signals, and based on those signals, they can give us insights into, okay, so how do you protect yourself? And this is where we come into the picture. Now, this is the Microsoft Digital Defense Report. Notice up here it says 23. They just released another one, 25, like 2 weeks ago. I have it right next to me. I still have the 23 here because I love this article. There are like 120 pages in this PDF document. I'm going to make sure that you get the link in here. But how can we protect against 99% of attacks? Obviously, do we believe that it is 99%? And to me, I don't care if it's 99 or 89. I'll take this at any given time. So enable NFA. Multi-factor authentication. I saw some of you were just logging into the tenant for the very first time, so probably you were asked for something like that. That is definitely the identity team that's responsible for that, which is good if you have an identity team. If you don't have an identity team, it's very often your responsibility. Apply zero trust principles. This is really annoying when I hear this, because what does this mean? Is this just another buzzword? Because we have had a lot of buzzwords in the industry. So if you can't say anything except that your manager is saying you need to apply zero trust, then we need to know what it is, right? We're going to cover that a little later on here. Obviously, we need to use XDR, anti-malware. We know that. Keep your systems up to date. This one here. This one we are discussing, at all of our customers. And when we look at, keeping our systems up to date, why should we do that? And why are we not doing that already? On one hand, we have all the systems, we have all the articles, we have the security folks saying, well, if you have out of date systems, they may be the key reasons why we have a breach. The other hand, you have 5,000 users, and you can just hear in the back of your head that they are complaining, because they used to complain back in the time when they were domain joined, and it took like 5, 8, 10 minutes to restart their machine. So obviously they were complaining. The challenge with that thought is, I don't understand why we have it, because we have had those complaints, but that thought is no longer current, if you ask me. At all of the customers I've been working with for the last, I would say, 1 or 2 years, after we enabled auto patch, and you are going to talk about auto patch, and it doesn't really matter if it's auto patch or another way of patching your systems, but after we enable that, and after we're just giving the end users, I don't know, 8 hours or 16 hours or whatever that the customer prefer, we have not heard a single complaint. And we are patching we're patching the OS, obviously, we are patching Edge, we're patching the applications that we have, and so on and so forth. I know you're also going to talk about third-party patching in here. So what I'm really saying is that when you hear complaints about this, it's very often from the likes of me, very old guys working in IT. It doesn't come from the users any longer. Then the fifth one down here is protect your data. This one here is, I would say, new to most of us, because what does it mean to protect my data? Is that like, share permissions and TFS permissions? Because then I know everything there is to know about that, how you have your full control and your read and how you combine them and so on and so forth. But this is not the case. What we are talking about here is obviously data loss prevention policies, everything you have in the Purview portal. Some of you have a license to use Purview. You have an E3 license, or you have an E5 license, or an A3 or an A5 if you're academic, meaning that you have the right to use this. And I would say, I have not attended the introduction here, but I would say 90% of you are probably not using it, because that's what I see around there. I understand it. There has been a lot of other things on our plate, and this has not had top priority. But all of a sudden, we got this little thing called Gen AI, and now this becomes really critical, because I don't want my co-pilot to be finding documents that maybe I have the permissions to read them, but I shouldn't really have the reasons to read them. So this report here is, as I said, it's really cool. And as I mentioned, there is a new report. It was recently just released. So the Digital Defense Report for 25. I just want to highlight just a single thing in here. I'm not going to go through the entire report, but they have the top 10 recommendations. And for someone like me, this recommendation here is, it couldn't be better. You need to manage the cyber risk at the boardroom level. I mean, that is the most important outcome of this report here. Management needs to understand this is important. They need to be able, they need to treat this cybersecurity, just like they're treating financials, for instance, and other compliance related cases. So this is not just something that we are pretending any longer, something that nerds are talking about. This is the real deal. What I've done internally in my organization is I've been going through the entire report. Then I created a summary, and I've presented that summary to my upper management. And I know I cannot keep their attention span is they are managers, so I had to keep it less than 30 minutes. And the first thing I had to do was really just establish trust between them and Microsoft. And that's why something like this, how are Microsoft getting this? Are they just trying to sell more products and so on and so forth? But the case for us, and the case for a lot of organizations, is you don't need another license. You already have the license. So selling this, and I selling this in quotation marks, to management is probably your number one priority based on this report here. Besides that, a lot of super interesting things. Invest in people, not just tools. I love that as well. That's also why you're attending a training here. It's not enough that you just acquire the Intune license. You need to understand how to use that one there. Okay, so trust me when I say I could talk all day about this slide here, because it's that important if you ask me. So why do we fail? And when I mean we, I really just mean me. So why do I fail when engaging in projects? Very often, and this is taken from Gartner, so this is not me, but I see this at a lot of different customers here. Very often, when we fail in performing a transformation like this is, in my opinion, it is typically a transformation. It's because we don't have a business-driven strategy. And if you go like, that sounds really smart. What is a business-driven strategy? I'll explain that later. And we also need a pragmatic adoption migration plan. And this is really super important. I've seen this many times. Here you have your new, Intune, your new autopilot, your new Intra, your new everything, and the migration and the adoption is a workshop. But I told you what we have created, so why don't you get it? But to most of us, changing from working with, Active Directory, Configuration Manager, WSUS, and so on and so forth, that's a big change. It's a change in the way we think. It's a change in the way we have done it. It's a cultural change. So there is definitely no way that we can just do a 3-hour handover and then, that's it. Then I understand everything. It doesn't work like that. And then obviously, not all cloud journeys are the same, but there are many similarities. So in here, I've just added a few things like cloud native, going to explain that, replacement, going to explain that. The business transformation is much more than just a technical thing, definitely going to explain that. So, so what is it that, in my opinion, we need? Well, you need frameworks. You need frameworks because when you are using a framework, you buy security, in my opinion. You buy, okay, this framework comes from a trusted source. Microsoft, they do have frameworks. They have a lot of different frameworks. And when we're doing this transformation, they have a couple of frameworks that we need to know about. You obviously also need an architecture. So, if I go to a customer and I just say, okay, they ask me what is Intune, and if I say, well, Intune can deploy applications, maybe the business manager there, he or she will go like, great. The architect, the responsible in there, the management, they want to know that, okay, we base everything out of a framework. We're using this architecture here. Once we have, told them that, and I'm going to explain that in the coming slides here, then we will typically get a sponsor. Because if I don't get a sponsor, this project, will just be prioritized down, maybe not this month, but maybe 3 months from now. Then, all of the work that we've been doing, someone else will get, a higher priority, and that's it. So I need a sponsor, and I will go a very long way to find me a sponsor, because once I have a sponsor, I know, hey, we have a business prioritization here. I will never get a sponsor without having a goal. I need to have my must-win battles. I need to have a direction so we all know where we are going. This is not different from implementing, a lot of other things in an organization. But if we don't want to turn out like just another IT project here, we need a way to include all of this. Now, a framework. Microsoft, and I said Microsoft have a couple of frameworks here. So the ones I've laid out here is the Microsoft Zero Trust framework. Microsoft Zero Trust framework, again, we will have links. It always starts with, you need to define your strategy. And this is where we, as IT folks, often make a mistake. So when management is saying, okay, Kent, so, why should I invest in this? Then I have a habit of saying, well, this is how it works. And they will just zoom out because they were not asking how it works, because they don't really care how it works. it's like, why should we invest in this? So we need to find, and this is really the magic word. What is the outcome? So if we do this, we will be able to support, our productivity. Or if we don't do this, we are going to, lose market share, whatever. You need to be able to define those outcomes, and obviously that's difficult. I have a couple of examples here in the slides, but I've seen once we are able to do this, our chances of securing a sponsor way higher. Okay, so the next thing we'll go ahead and do here is then we'll start the planning. Once we plan, then we'll start, the ready phase and so on and so forth, and then we start the adopting. How is this different from what I've done in the past? Well, in the past, defining strategy would be, hey, this takes 40 days. Once we're done here, you'll be able to migrate from Windows 2000 to Windows XP using OSD, and we'll be patching, and that's it. And management wouldn't even ask, because they were like, I don't care. Now, I said Microsoft have a couple of frameworks. A second framework I have in here is the framework, the adoption framework. And the adoption framework is very, very similar to the Zero Trust framework. So in the adoption framework, you can see, and that's what I have on my side here, my right side, defining the strategy, the planning, the ready, exactly similar to what we have here. Adopt, the same as we have over here. Govern and manage. Well, okay, over here they're just called, envision, onboard, and drive value, but very, very similar. So it's not like you have to, know 5 or 10 different frameworks. Okay. So now I have a framework. I may have a sponsor. Hopefully by now I have a sponsor. But how am I going to start everything? We always start everything. We have to start everything by delivering what we call a strategy workshop. And in the strategy workshop, we will figure out, okay, what are the customer's headache? Why do you really need this? What are your goals? What are the stakeholders, the competencies we have? What is the roadmap? And very often the roadmap is what we are building together. And how do we figure out if we are successful or not? So we need to take the time to sit down and really listen. And it's, sometimes this can be done in half a day, but very often it takes maybe a day, and then we're writing a report, and then it may take half a day to go in there and talk about what's in that report. But once we have that, we can move on to the planning phase. In the planning phase, you can see it's a really big box, and it's only 2 words: security baselines. You're going to hear about Windows security baselines within Intune later on this week. This is not only those security baselines that we have in there. This is security baselines for Defender, for your M365 platform, and obviously also for for managing your Windows devices, but also for managing your iOS devices, your Mac devices, and so on and so forth. And very, very often a customer will say, well, in here we are in the financial business, so we need to comply to DORA, for instance, or I need to comply to CIS 18, or I need to comply to, and then they will give you some regulatory requirements there. And that's really cool, as long as we know it up front. Then, as we go into the ready phase, that's where we will start by looking at our identity part. Maybe it's not your responsibility. Maybe, hey, I'm not the one configuring Windows Hello for Business or the conditional access framework or what have you, but I still need to ensure that someone else has done that. Because if nobody has done that, we will, we'll face some challenges along the way. For the devices, are we going to do cloud native? I presume, and I know doing that, I will probably have to argue with some, but I presume that we are going cloud native. Cloud native, the definition of that is intra-joint and Intune managed. And some of you will say, well, we can't really do that because I have a manufacturing floor where we have 200 devices and they're attached to these robots or what have you. Totally understand that. My answer to you would be skip them, okay? And then do cloud native where you can do cloud native. You can probably do cloud native for maybe 40, 50, 60% of your devices. Do that, learn a lot about your environment. And then once you have done those, reach that 60%, you'll probably be able to go back and then look at the remaining 40% and say, okay, can we do something about them as well? You'll also see here, I have one called detach from AD. And when I say detach from AD, I only mean the device identity. I don't mean the user identity, because I know we are far, far away from being able to do that. And my goal here is not to eliminate Active Directory. My goal here is to secure the endpoint and to make sure that the endpoint experience for the end user is becoming better. And it will definitely be better when they don't have to spend 5 to 10 minutes trying to process group policies. I mean, it will definitely be more secure when we don't have to worry about Kerberos and other legacy protocols there. I also have to worry about data. As I mentioned, you're not going to, probably not doing Purview day one, but you need to have a little knowledge about Purview data security, because at one point in time, someone in your company will start utilizing Gen AI. They will probably be using, ChatGPT, Gemini, a lot of those different tools. And then you will try to say, well, we have to do Microsoft Copilot, and some will say, well, I really like ChatGPT so much more. But one of the challenges with ChatGPT and other Gen AI tools is that you don't have the same control over your data as you have with Microsoft Copilot. That's just a fact. And that control over data you will gain by knowing about Purview. You don't have to be a Purview expert, but you need to be able to drive a conversation, if you ask me. We definitely also need threat protection. So here, I know we have Carbon Black. I know we have a ton of different threat protection systems. Just to make everything easier, I've just said, well, in here you have Defender for Endpoint, you have Defender for Office, you have Sentinel, and so on and so forth. So this is like my goal architecture. This is what I want to achieve. And after that, I definitely want to make sure that we have some adoption. So if I can show that to my team and then say, okay, this is what we're doing. So we are not just doing Mac OS management, for instance, or we're not just doing shared devices or something like that. No. This all is a piece of the puzzle. So we will be doing more. I'm just mindful of the time here. We'll take a little break because I know you've been going on for a couple of hours. Isn't that so, Johan?
Yeah, we started at 9, so they have been working hard for.
Okay, this will be the last slide, and then we'll take a break.
All right.
So for those of you still alive, now, so as I mentioned, how do we make sure that we don't fail, right? Framework, architecture, and so on and so forth. This is the architecture that you need to know. This is the architecture that you need to be able to sell to everyone in IT and your management. And obviously, they don't need to know exactly how the request enhancement works, but they definitely need to know that, hey, we have the zero trust architecture. All the magic lies within here, within the zero trust policies. This is where we have the engine. We are all here on my left side. So down here, I have my devices. Up here, I have my identities. And we all want some kind of access on the right side. So, maybe we want to access some infrastructure. Maybe I want to access an application. Maybe I want to access a mail or some structured, unstructured data, what have you. To be able to access all of that, there will be evaluation of all the signals that I'm sending when I'm logging into a resource. So for instance, I'm in Copenhagen right now, meaning that one of the signals that I will be sending is my location, not my exact location. So it's not like my manager can see, that I'm not sitting in the office, but my ISP location here. So I'm logging in from Denmark, and it could be that Denmark was one of the bad countries. It's not. But it could be that up here, we have a company policy saying if you're coming from Denmark, there's no way we're going to let you in. So we're just simply going to block your request right here. I don't care if you're sitting on a Mac. I don't care if you're sitting on an Android. Just the fact that you're coming from this location, we're going to block. It could also be that you say, okay, so being in Denmark in itself is okay, but 6 hours ago you're sitting on the beach in Miami. So how can you be in Denmark in just 6 hours if your name is not Harry Potter? So we don't see anything wrong with you. You're still logging on from a corporate device. We can see that you're still using your right password and what have you. But I just want to make sure that you are who you are, because you're right now you're just sending a signal that kind of challenges me a little. So I won't block you. I'm just going to ask you for some MFA, because what you have right there is like impossible travel. 6 hours ago you were sitting on the beach. Now you're in Copenhagen. So all of these signals here are extremely important, and we all work together to make this a really, really good user experience. MFA will block most security intruders from coming in. That's good. But on the other hand, you don't want to prompt your users for MFA 10 times a day. So if you only had to worry about security, it would be super easy. But we also have to worry about productivity and user experience, and that's really the challenge there. So let's take the first break of the week here, knowing that now we know a little about the frameworks. We know a little about the zero trust architecture. With that, we will definitely get our sponsor. And with our sponsor, we can start to do all this super cool stuff. Johan, you're typically the person with the time here. What do we do? 10, 15 minutes?
We are doing 10 minutes. And if you don't mind, I will put a timer up and running, unless you have it.
Perfect.
All right, we'll do that. Steal the screen for a second. You will get it back eventually.
Maybe.
All right, see you guys back in 10 minutes here.
Here in 10. I think I can go ahead and share my screen again.
Yes, sir.
Right.
And welcome back, everyone, of course.
Yeah, I hope you really enjoyed the break here. I know there are going to be a lot of labs and exercises and what have you. So bear with me while I'm doing all the talking here. So we just before the break we talked about you need the frameworks, the architecture, the sponsor, and so on and so forth. I was talking a little about some of all of this, the zero trust architecture, and even though we talk about the entire and we support the entire zero trust architecture, I do know that We don't really worry too much about the network, and we don't worry too much about the infrastructure. That's why I have colored this in red. Typically, when we work with real IT, that's what I call it, we work with identities, with endpoints, with data, and with apps, right? So we do use and we do build our design principles on Zero Trust, but we primarily focus on these 4 pillars: identity, devices, data, and apps. It's not the same when we present it, as we don't acknowledge that someone will have to focus on infrastructure network, but it will typically be the data center team, not us. Okay, then I talked a little about, you know, having some priorities and having like a direction. And one of the things we really need to figure out is, so what is our vision here? And in this example, and again, I'm going to share everything, and this is literally just an example that I wrote earlier this afternoon while preparing for the session here. You know, hey, my vision for this is to lay the foundation for the client platform of the future based on security and automation. So if this is my vision, what are all the business goals? How do I sell this? Well, we will focus on user friendliness. It will make sure that technology is not a barrier for new digital innovation projects. Why is that important? It's important because if it is a barrier, it's going to hurt business, right? And if it's a real barrier for a long period of time, the organization is going to bypass IT when they need to go out and purchase new IT solutions. So we will just be the ones that will get information about, you know, the new applications that they have bought after the fact that they've bought it, and then you just need to support something you didn't even know anything about. So, you know, stuff like faster time to market for new IT solutions, better operations, service levels, employee mobility, comply with legal. So if we have any of those requirements, sometimes it's the legal requirements that is like driving everything. So, you know, figure out what are your business goals, figure out what is the vision, and then realize that a project, in order for a project to be successful, it's not only technology. I admit technology is by far the coolest part of this. Don't get me wrong, but we are very often really good at technology, but we fail on some of the other aspects of the project. So figure out the people. You know, what are the future competency requirements? So what do I need for my team to be able to support that solution once it has been implemented? So, and it's so important that I wrote it in twice. Very important. A little mistake there. So, you know, what are the we definitely need some workshops. We need to know what it is that we have, right? So you'll have, you know, conditional access workshops, you will have the modern endpoint workshops, and so on and so forth. These are just examples. For processes, you definitely, and you're going to see this many times this week here, you need to make sure that you have a vendor that will actually support you. You also need to make sure that you understand that the vendor is going to charge you if they are going to add you know, your new devices into autopilot. He may be charging you, I don't know, $5 extra per PC. I had a vendor today that I think that was about the price. The price in Danish kroner was just like 40 kroners, which is very close to $5 per PC. I need to understand, you know, what are all the processes I have? Will they work in the future? Very often, when you have an OSD process, that OSD process is going to change. It's going to change a lot. So, you know, are we ready for that change? Can we live with that change? And so on and so forth. You need to define a bunch of new processes here. You also need to make sure that you have, you know, budget approval. As I mentioned, that's why the sponsor is so important. Define the endpoint lifecycle. So what are we going to do when we don't need the devices any longer? This is really kind of a golden opportunity to make sure that we have the processes that we need. Then if I look at the technical part, so the technical part here is, as I said, this is by far I mean, that's what you're doing all week, more or less, right? You're going to perform an AD to intra analysis. So what is the impact when migrating away from intra on the devices? Oh, sorry, migrating away from Active Directory on your devices to intra. That's a really good question. I can tell you, you will probably run into challenges with files, with print, with applications, maybe even with connectivity. And obviously, there are solutions to a lot of that. One solution, and I will share this. But one solution I was using when working on a project similar to this was, okay, how do I figure out, how many of my existing applications that are using legacy protocols? So so here I was looking at all of my devices were in Defender. So in the last 30 days, how many have been connecting using this remote port, or using NTLM or using Kerberos? Because if they're using Kerberos, AD will be required if we don't do something else, right? So after running this, instead of just guessing, okay, I think we have this app and we have that app, I got a really good list here of apps that we are using, and I can see how many unique users have we had, what protocol, and so on and so forth. And yep, 3,312 users using Link. I mean, it's an oldie, right? I don't even remember when I was using Link and Skype and so on and so forth. When it says Outlook and Word, it's because they're using some of the older applications. So the next thing I did was, after getting this list here, I literally just combined it with Copilot, and I was like, okay, so how many of these applications do we believe will be, have the biggest impact, and so on and so forth? And then I got a nice little table here. But what I'm really saying is we can mitigate most of the challenges that we have in here. So all of this is really no good unless I'm able to tell leadership, hey, now we're here, now we're there, and so on and so forth. And again, you're going to talk about this later this week. We need some reporting. So what are the reporting requirements? Let's define them, during the very initial phase of the project. Do we have any required regulations that we need to report on? Typically here in Europe, I have something called NIS2. I might also have CIS 18. I might have DORA. I might have, a lot of other regulatory requirements. I need to be able to report on those. So this is a transformation map. And it's super simple in the sense that you literally just figure out, okay, so what's important for us. You start by defining the vision. You have the business goals in here, and then these are just examples of a bunch of different tasks. Some of these tasks here are more important than others. So if I just take this and do like this, let's just do it red. If it's more important, then this is a must-win battle. So I would just highlight this one here, so everybody knows that, hey, let's just put it down here. We are not going to, do anything until we have really figured out how do we prioritize the SCCM workload migrations. So you will have different must-win battles. They are not all must-win battles. They cannot be. I mean, you don't want to die on all hills, right? So there are some must-win battles here, and that's sometimes that's a little challenge to figure out, what is a must-win battle. But that's how you prioritize everything. Now, one of the must-win battles I have in all of my projects is this one here, the technical gap analysis. Because as I mentioned, we talk about zero trust, but we may have a challenge really understanding what zero trust really is and what it means for us. So in the gap mapping, we typically do what we call a gap mapping and prioritization exercise. And here I have a spreadsheet. Let me just take that spreadsheet, move it over here. This spreadsheet here is, I mean, hopefully it's going to save your day. And the day is not, day really just started, right? It's not even lunch yet. But this is a zero trust assessment for, and then you put in, your company name here. So you'll see here that here I have, zero trust assessment for my identity, my devices, and so on and so forth. And down here, I have like a tab for each of the pillars that I have in the zero trust framework. Now, if I go to, let's start by going to devices, because that's our primary concern. Then the way this works is, let me just, so we can see all of it, because it is really, really neat. Here, you will see categories. So there is some tenant configuration. There will be some mobile devices, some MAN. There will be some Windows. There will be some Mac. There will be, you have all of these categories down. Then if I just zoom in a little bit, because nobody can read this. Then one of the biggest challenges when starting a new project with a new technology is, what do I do first? And not only, why do I have my mouse? There's my mouse. So my mouse disappeared. There it is. So it disappears when it's on this screen here. Let me see if I can do anything about this. There it is again. Okay, so what do I do first? Well, first, in order for you to be successful, you do what's in this column here. So you set up notification and monitoring and service health and dashboard and so on and so forth. So it's going to tell me what I have to do first. But not only is it going to tell me what I have to do first, if I look here, it's also going to tell me, well, this will have a medium implementation effort and it will have a low user impact. So now I can go to my managers and I can say, okay, so this is how we're going to prioritize this. Microsoft, our trusted vendor, is telling us we need to do this first. Obviously, there is no way on this planet that you're going to finish all of this in production in a week, in a month, not even in a year. This is a roadmap, but what you have to do is you have to go in and then look at each of these exercises here. So if let me just scroll down to Windows devices, because we can all relate to that. So I just pass iOS and Android. I scroll down to Windows devices, and then I look at, okay, review your provisioning strategy. Johan talked about that earlier this morning. We can do hybrid, we can do intra, we can do, we need to do this. This one here, extremely important. Stop Active Directory domain join new workstations. Don't do that. You know, deploy maybe hybrid or deploy intra. So what I'm doing here is I'm losing my mouse every single time I go from Zoom and away from Zoom here. So let's just get it back. Easily, there are many ways you can look like an idiot, but not being able to find your mouse is definitely one of them. There it is. There it is. Great. Okay. So what you can do is for each of these activities, and this you can do in a week, for each of these activities, it's your responsibility together with the team to say, okay, are we going to stop AD domain join new workstations? Maybe you cannot do that right now, or maybe you're not going to pursue this because you don't have to do everything that Microsoft is telling you, but you really need to make sure that you look at this, discuss it, and then you give it the right category in here. And it's okay that it's not completed. It's okay that you will follow up. Everything in here is okay, but it's not okay that it's not started. So as you can see down here where I have my Cloud PKI, I need to go in here and then say, okay, so let's have a discussion about Cloud PKI. Where do we stand on this? You're not, and Cloud PKI is interesting because we can do Cloud PKI, but why do we want to do Cloud PKI? I'm not going to get rid of Active Directory. I'm not going to remove my servers from Active Directory. So if you already have an existing PKI infrastructure that is working, then you can just create a connector between Intune and that existing infrastructure. Then you don't have a problem. That may be the easiest way for you to actually fix delivering certificates. So maybe you're not going to pursue that. That's, in my opinion, perfectly okay. You made a decision, but it could also be that, okay, we are going to migrate, or we don't have a PKI infrastructure today. Then maybe we're just we have a third-party solution. We're not going to use the Intune suite for this. Maybe we have another solution. That again is perfectly okay. I have never been at a customer where they have like 100% complete. You may go like, okay, I only focus on my devices. A lot of stuff in here, and you can see first you do this, then you do that, and then after that you start doing what's in the in my column here to the right. If you if you're not really sure what does this mean, resource access, certificates, VPN, and so on and so forth, you just simply click on this. It will open up a link. This link is going to give you more description. So this is how you can do it. Why does this matter? Extremely important. Because your sponsor may come by and say, okay, Ken, so why are you spending so many hours? And then you can say, well, this is why. This is not how it works, but this is why it matters. So we improve the user experience, and he or she will then say, okay, I'm happy. There will also typically also in here be a link to a Microsoft Learn page. So there will be this is where you can find much more information on this. So click here. It will take you to the Learn page, and click here where you can set your classification, your category. I mentioned you need to look at the devices roadmap, but you definitely also need to look at your identity roadmap, because one of the things that where you are super important is when we're going to define the conditional access posture. We are going to have MFA, but we're going to have the right MFA. So you are important here. So everything in here around MFA, conditional access, is definitely going to be your responsibility. Another thing that I do believe is also going to be your responsibility in one way or another. Let's see where I have this. Every single time we have something with apps, configuring attribute flows for app provisioning, rollout app automated provisioning, and so on and so forth. This is important. There will also be, see where I have that. Otherwise, I can just explain it. But some of these work items in here is like, as Johan mentioned, we need to implement extra intra connects. We need to make sure that we are, migrating or synchronizing our users, synchronizing our devices, not synchronizing domain accounts, domain admin accounts, and so on and so forth. So this is, in my opinion, really, really, really cool. You have a very structured way of attacking zero trust. And I would say before I started working with this spreadsheet, and you can download the spreadsheet, I will give you the link. But before I started working with this, I would have a lot of plans for my customers, but they, sometimes they had a hard time figuring out, okay, is this really important? But once we have Microsoft coming in and saying, hey, this is what we're doing with our top enterprise customers, it's a way easier sell to our customers in here. Cool. If you have never seen this, then as I said, this is going to save your day. So now we have the gap mapping. Right, so I think by now we have the framework, we have the prioritization, we have the business goals, we have everything. And one of the things we realized is that it's never just Intune. So if someone is telling you, hey, Lotte, Joe, can you go ahead and do an Intune project? By now that it's not just about device management. It's also about conditional access. It's about intra. It's about mobile devices, Defender. It's also about decommissioning. It's about the whole life cycle thing. And then another thing is, if someone tells you that, hey, we need to do 100% migration, stop that discussion right away. It's not 100%. It's never ever 100% in most organizations. A little tip here. Get your persona use case in control. And a persona use case, what is that? A persona is figuring out a way to because who is using these applications, or the person you have there. Figuring out a way to because who is using these applications, or the person you have there. How is she connecting? Is she working from home? What kind of devices is she using? What kind of applications is she using? What time a day is she using the applications, and so on and so forth. So you need to define all of that, because once you have that information, you can create the conditional access policies. You can successfully deploy your licenses. I saw you had some discussions around that earlier this morning, and so on and so forth. So this could be another way of looking at the roadmap. We had the transformation map. That was like looking at processes and competences and leadership and so on and so forth. In here, I'm just looking, about the cool stuff, the technology, making sure identity and access is in place. We have our cloud identity, we have conditional access, we have Windows 11 for Business and all of that good stuff. making sure we have OneDrive, Teams, Zoom, whatever, but cloud files and services are in place. Is it impossible to use Intune and Entra if you need to access a file server? Not at all. That can definitely be done. We are doing that at many customers, because if they have not migrated their files yet, it's another project, and it very often takes a long time. So yeah, we can definitely do that. We just need cloud Kerberos trust, and then we also need to do a little scripting, so we map the drives in there. For endpoint security, you are going to talk about this. We're probably going to talk about most of these topics here all week. How do we handle firmware? How do we handle drivers? How do we handle BitLocker if you were using IMBAM earlier? What are we going to do now in the future here? Endpoint servicing. Are we going to do Windows Update for Business? Are we going to do auto patch? How are you going to handle that as well? And then for device management, you have a lot of different things that you need to worry about here. Are we going to do co-management? Are you going to do, are you going to do GPOs if you still are doing hybrid, and so on and so forth? So there are a lot of things, a lot of questions in here that you need to answer. Cool. This is a neat little example of a persona profile. So in this persona profile here, and I use the persona profile for my conditional access. I use my persona profile to maybe define my deployment rings if they're user-based. I use my persona profile to figure out who should I configure various applications to, but mostly, as I said, for conditional access. So for this one here, I have an identity. So this is Richard. Say hello to Richard. I know that Richard is HR source, and automated provisions synced to Active Directory by our HR system. So I know all of this. Why is this important? Because maybe I need to get some of the attributes. So if I'm creating a deployment ring, maybe I need to figure out by looking at an attribute here from the HR system that this is how I'm going to identify Richard, right? Then I know what kind of applications that he's using, Exchange, SharePoint, some other stuff. I know the work style in here, the current needs, does he need VDI? And what kind of devices is being used? What kind of signals are we going to look at for conditional access? As I mentioned, impossible travel. Is he using iOS devices? All of that good stuff. The more we know, the easier it is to configure the right policies from the get-go. Does he need any remote access in here? Now, with all of this, it could be, and you were talking about licenses, it could be that, hey, maybe we have a limit in the number of P2 licenses, so maybe there is some automated stuff we would like to do for a persona like Richard, but we are limited by the fact that we only have 300 licenses, something like that. This is all part of something we need to know about. As I mentioned earlier on, you will also be introduced to GenAI. If you're not already introduced to GenAI, you will be. And when we start with GenAI, does not matter what kind of GenAI tool you end up selecting, you will have to go through the very same. So what is your technical readiness? And a typical GenAI environment or a typical GenAI project always begins with zero trust implementation. So how are we doing on identity security? And then data protection. Do we have DLP processes in place? What is, our file servers and all of that good stuff. Once that is in place, then we can start to talk about user enablement, and then we can, talk about adoption and rolling out the licenses. But this needs to be in place first. And that's not a problem because you followed the Zero Trust roadmap, you use the Excel spreadsheet, so you are already on top of this. If you didn't, then that may be a challenge, right? So just looking at the chat here. So again, let me know if there are any questions here. Now, when we look at how are we going to manage our systems, then I would say this slide here was, to me, really interesting. Maybe a couple of years ago, I've kept it in the deck here because it's still interesting to know that we have on-prem. Well, with on-prem, you can do all of this. Then we have cloud attached or tenant attached. And then we have, cloud managed or co-managed in here. I would say most organizations today, if they want to migrate, they will typically do some kind of tenant attachment and co-management between Intune and Configuration Manager. Once you have done that, you can pretty much use the best of both worlds in here. Traditional OS deployment, Johan and Andrew can talk for many hours about how you can get cloud OS deployment up and running. Not a problem. When there is no check mark here, it's just because Microsoft is not really offering that out of the box, but that's not the same as it doesn't work. Okay, not the same. So what do you need to consider when you're doing this transformation? Cloud Kerberos Trust. If you do not know what this is, you need to look into that. And I'm pretty sure we're going to talk about that later on this week. Windows Hello for Business. Windows Hello for Business is probably the #1 security implementation that is most loved by end users. It's very rare that you can increase security and you will get end users saying, hey, thanks, now everything is so much easier. Windows Hello for Business, if you're not familiar, exactly the same as you have on your phone. You just use your eyes, your thumb to log into your phone. Much more secure than having a password. You will still have your password, but it's much more secure. It's much more secure because your biometrics, hopefully nobody's going to steal your eyes. If they do steal your eyes, they don't have your password, so they also need to steal your device. If they steal both, that's the definition of a really bad day. But besides that, they can only get access to this device. If I steal your password, I can get access, as your identity to, from, any location, pretty much, right? So we need to definitely know about Windows Hello for Business as well. Going to be covered in here. We need to figure out about group policies. And one of the things that I've seen organizations spend, I would say, a little too much time on is really how are we going to migrate all of our group policies. And you will hear this from others time and again, that maybe you should spend more time about thinking about how you're going to, are you going to use this framework like the SIS framework? Are you going to use that framework, or whatever? You think about how you want to protect your future environment. I do understand that existing group policies can be interesting, but typically, if you say to your management, hey, we have based our Intune environment on SIS and the SIS security framework, you'll typically get a thumbs up. There are other things like you probably have to check in with Service Desk. You will have to check in with Service Desk, make sure that if there are any workflows, and then those workflows are changed, right? So doesn't really do us any good if I'm creating a ticket and I cannot select the new processes and what have you in the system there. Printers, file servers, so on and so forth. Okay, so for those of you who are working with SCCM, and if you're working on a standard SCCM solution today with no cloud connection, and there are still millions and millions of devices being managed by Configuration Manager only. Here is the recipe for, you know, how do we really get started. So you connect your tenant through Cloud Attach or Tenant Attach. You do that, and you end up by, you know, migrating some of your workloads over. Whatever you do, just make sure that you do it quickly. That's really my experience, because if we have half of the workloads being managed by Configuration Manager, the other half being managed by Intune, and when we hire new people, maybe they don't know anything about Config Manager and what have you, we end up having an environment that is too complicated. I do get that we have to test. I do get that if we want to migrate our Windows update or our WSUS software update policies over, we want to test it. We want to test it maybe for a couple of months, you know, be wiser and so on and so forth. But we don't want to test it for a year, right? At one point, you really have to make sure that, hey, now we're doing it. So when you enter the battleground, make sure you have a plan, a deadline for when you're going to exit that again. So by this date, we're going to, you know, migrate everything over, or we're going to go back and then we're going to reevaluate here.
Ken?
Don't want to be, yeah.
A quick question. The document you were sharing with the roadmap and so on, will you be able to share that with the students?
Yeah, the Excel.
I think that was what the request came from. I wasn't entirely sure which document it was.
Yep, I think it was probably this one here.
Yeah, I was going to ask about sharing that too. I could really use that in terms of moving forward.
And I see Fabian
Yes.
already shared that. Cool. Yeah. So the answer is yes.
Yeah, teamwork, love it.
I will delegate
Thank
that
you.
task to Fabian.
That's amazing.
Thanks, buddy. Okay. So my point here is really, you know, make sure that you don't overcomplicate your environment. And for those of you who are still, you know, using Configuration Manager and not really sure what co-management is really having more than one boss. And having more than one boss when you're a Windows device means that you can receive policies from Intune and you can receive policies from Configuration Manager. Under normal circumstances, a workload will, you know, be either on the Config Manager side or on the Intune side. It cannot be, you know, like both. But there are always exceptions to the rule. So for instance, if I move over the compliance workload to Intune, within Intune, I can go in and say, well, as part of this evaluation, also include compliance checks from within Configuration Manager. So even though the workload is migrated over, I can still, you know, use policies from Configuration Manager. The same when you're creating baselines in Configuration Manager. You can go in your deployment and say, hey, you know, still consider this, even though the compliance workload is handled by Intune. So normally you would say there's only like one master, but there are exceptions to the rule, which makes perfectly good sense. The next question is really, do I use this? Yeah, for pretty much most of the customers when we're talking about client device in a standard organization. So, you know, if we're using it in one of the more secret services, what have you, like a nuclear plant and stuff like that, then we don't have any internet connection. Then obviously we're just using Config Manager. But for most, what I would call traditional organizations, we are definitely using co-management. And I often get, you know, like, okay, so how should I migrate? In what order should I migrate my workloads? Compliance is always going over first. Patching is one of the workloads that we migrate. And then typically what we have at the end, if one of the goals is to decommission SCCM, and I'm not saying it should be, but for the customer, if it is, then one of the last things we typically have would be OS deployment, because that is a big task. Figuring out, you know, all of our task sequences. How can we migrate, you know, convert those processes into an autopilot profile? That's a really interesting journey there. And you will get immediately value when you implement co-management. So when I implement co-management, this is a screenshot taken from Intune. You can see here that it will, as part of the co-management process, the agent here will say to Intune, hey, you know, I'm healthy. So if the config manager agent is not healthy, if it cannot communicate with configuration manager, it can still communicate with Intune. It will tell Intune that, hey,
Right, everyone.
Say to Intune, hey, you know, I'm healthy. So if the config manager agent is not healthy, if it cannot communicate with configuration manager, it can still communicate with Intune. It will tell Intune that, hey, you know, there is a problem with the config manager agent here. So that in itself is kind of neat. You'll also see that we will be able to do interesting stuff like remote wipe and retire and so on and so forth. So this is even without you know, selecting any of the workloads in here. Then one of the other things we have is, you know, we also need to be able, or one of the other challenges we have is we also need to be able to, you know, manage our systems, our configuration manager systems, when they are away from the office and when they are not VPN connected. Because in my opinion, VPN is, and I know that from a lot of customers, they go like, well, we have VPN for security reasons. And I go like, that I don't understand. It's not really for security reasons you have a VPN. I do understand maybe, you know, why you have a VPN, but it's not a security thing, not in my opinion. Anyhow, if we don't have VPN, if we're not always on, then the challenge is, you know, as I'm roaming, you know this, there is no way I can go, you know, back in, right? So I'm not being managed, I'm not being patched, I'm not being, you know, anything. So what we can do is we can do a standard internet-based client management environment where you punch some holes in the firewall. You install a management point, a distribution point, and a software update point, and then you configure, you know, a connection to the clients. You make sure that it's all PKI driven, what have you, and then you can manage the client, you know, using this. This works, but not that many is using this, making it a little challenging from time to time when you have to troubleshoot, because there's not, you know, a whole lot of community documentation out there. Not a whole lot of consultants actually know how this works, and it's a bit, you know, it's a bit yesterday, I would say. Now, Microsoft also introduced the cloud management gateway, and they introduced this one here years ago. So this is an Azure integration, meaning that I will install my cloud management gateway in Azure. I will have a CMG connection point internally, and these two here will have like a persistent connection. So when I'm roaming, I will try to connect to a management point, to a domain controller. When I'm unable to connect to a domain controller, SCCM, the agent, will say, okay, hey, if you cannot connect to your domain, you're probably traveling, right? You're on the road. So I will automatically flip over, and then I will start to communicate with the CMG. So I'll automatically and transparently communicate with the cloud management gateway. As a client, I don't really know that, and I really shouldn't care. The cloud management gateway, as you can see on this part of the architectural drawing here, it will automatically connect and communicate with the management point and the software update point. It won't be communicating with the distribution point, because at this point in time, we don't really need that. We don't want them to start downloading content over the internal distribution point. Instead, what we can do on the Cloud Management Gateway is we can distribution point enable this. So we can distribute the content we want to distribute into the cloud, and then packages, applications, images, and what have you, they can be downloaded from the cloud here. As I said, the Cloud Management Gateway has been around for many years, and it has definitely been a way to simplify the infrastructure when we're talking about multiple physical locations and having multiple distribution points and so on and so forth. So if you haven't used this and you have big SCCM configuration manager hierarchy, I would definitely look into this. Cost is not your issue. Your issue may be that you don't have Azure configured yet, so maybe this is the first Azure service you're using. Then that will obviously be the biggest challenge, because now you also need to figure out how you're going to utilize Azure. You need a governance plan for that, and so on and so forth. You can add in multiple CMGs. So a CMG is really just a proxy. So it doesn't do much, but there is still a limit. So Microsoft is saying, well, for a CMG, let's say you can have 3,000 clients, but if you want more, you can just add multiple CMGs. Guess what? It's not a hard-coded limit. So if you have 4,000, it will just take a little longer. The clients down here will never notice that. You can always add, you can always remove a CMG without that impacting the clients in here. And the CDP is just, a cloud management gateway where you also enable the distribution point feature in here. I think, any questions? We implemented CMG for a few years ago, huge game changers. Yeah. So Kevin, I totally get what you're saying. The Cloud Management Gateway was a huge game changer. During a couple of things happened during Corona, or a lot of things happened during Corona. But one of the things that definitely happened was that Teams and Zoom, boom, everybody used it, pretty much overnight. The Cloud Management Gateway, I can really not count the number of CMGs that I assisted customer implementing during that first months of Corona, April and May. I mean, it was insane, and we could actually see, and when I say we, it was Microsoft, we could see a dip in the number of globally connected configuration manager agents. You could see that on the telemetry, and I know that because they have shown the numbers at a conference. So when they saw that dip there, they were like, okay, so now the whole world is going to move away from configuration manager. We made it to 160 million devices. That's really cool. But then eventually, as first of all, we got cloud management gateways in place. Companies, organizations upgraded their VPN tunnels and what have you. We just saw that that number of devices increase again, and the last number I saw was like 205 or 10 million devices in management in the config manager Intune space there. So it's super interesting. Is config manager baseline audit and remote script execution supported on a CMG? Yeah, you pretty much everything you will be able to support on a CMG. Some stuff like remote tools doesn't work. And Mike is asking, Johan, can we do Pixie now for OSD?
Not with Microsoft technologies of the cloud. You have to use a third-party iPixie server or Pixie server that is capable of HTTPS. Microsoft doesn't.
I think that was a perfect, handover of the class back to you guys. Thanks a lot for having me. I mean, it's always interesting, and thanks a lot for listening. And yeah, enjoy the rest of the week. I'll be sharing the slides, and can we agree that you did share, Fabian? He shared the Zero Trust template there. Really, really neat. Cool.
We have witnesses on that too. So Kent, as always, stellar presentation. Thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your evening, afternoon here, and we will take a quick break for lunch here. So again, thank you so much, Kent. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
All right, so we are going to take an hour break for lunch here. I'm not going to put up a timer. I'm just going to leave